And then who is here? It's Chris, Susan Schaefer, Brian DeSesa, Jeanette Sobe. Okay, can we stand for the pledge? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So we will start with public input. Is there anybody here for public input? Nope. Okay. With that, we can move to the items for discussion, which is the superintendent search. So Superintendent Graves issued her resignation letter at our last board meeting with a date of retirement January 6th, 2020. We have engaged school leadership as a search firm to perform the search process. And I think the first thing we wanted to discuss is the calendar of the search. You can see up here, school leadership provided us with two options for a search schedule. Option one is up right now. Option two is also in the board docs packet under items for discussion. So if you happen to have your laptops and have it open, you can see both. One of those options, so option one, provides for the search along the schedule that Katie provided, where we hire a new superintendent in December and Katie retires in January. We've been informed that is not an ideal timeline to perform a search. We won't get a great pool of applicants. So option two, which was recommended, is that we have a timeline where a new superintendent would start in July of 2020. We've had some executive discussion about certain aspects of this that relate to executive materials, certain personnel related issues. So we can't go into those, but it would be great to get everybody's feedback on option one versus option two without having to discuss anything that we can't discuss in public. And I don't know, Katie, if you wanted to say a few more words about the search itself.
Well, I think some things that school leadership brings to the table as far as finding a really highly qualified candidate is what we call a closed search versus an open search. An open search is where the community would interview directly candidates, versus a closed search is where the Board of Education would see the candidates. For very, and I think this is a very high performing district. This is a high collaboration district. The only problem is very strong candidates will shy away from an open search, because should they get down to 8, 6 or 4 candidates and it be an open search, people in the community that are meeting those candidates are then going to call back to their high-performing district and say, hey, what do you think of your superintendent? And that superintendent, should they not get the job, they know that their community is very disappointed in them for looking outside. And people might decide to make moves for a variety of reasons. It could be family, it could be a new challenge, it could be that they have, for me, it was coming closer to where my family lived. I have 10 nieces and nephews that live in the Brooklyn and North Jersey and Nassau area. So that was a very personal decision on my part, and my not having my community know that I was looking at Sag Harbor was I would not have applied had it not been a closed search. And I know that high-performing school superintendents from high-performing districts feel that same way. So school leadership makes it a closed search, and what they do is they rely on the the conversations with all of the different constituents, the parents, the community members, the boards of education, the teachers, and then the surveys that they do of those. So having that time and that information plays very strongly into their search and what candidate they choose from the large pool of candidates hopefully they will have. So I just wanted to explain the difference between closed searches and open searches. So your very best candidates are attracted to closed searches. That makes sense? Yeah.
So we'd love to open it up for discussion about the two options and anything else about the timeline, the things in the timeline, and the options that you wanted to go over.
I think it's worthy mentioning when the season is, that you kind of reach out to the community, or what that school leadership recommends, reaching out to the community of potential candidates in order to get the largest pool. Because ideally you want to get the largest pool of candidates, you're more likely then to get the best possible match for your district. And they said it's very unusual for a superintendent right after the school year starts and they've set their goals and they've kind of gotten on that train to all of a sudden be thinking about leaving in the middle of the year. They tend to be very committed and loyal to seeing things through. So if we were looking at filling the post in early January with the departure of Mrs. Braves, then we would have to be looking and interviewing, we would be interviewing in the September timeframe, October timeframe, by the time we could get everything else lined up. And they said that they were just concerned that we were not going to get a large enough pool. Traditionally, superintendents, when they make moves, it's on that school calendar cycle. They kind of wrap up, they give their notice. In New York State, I think it's 30 days required, but in Long Island, the average is 6 months. So there's contractual obligations to take into consideration. So option number 2 affords the opportunity to there's going to be community outreach. So I know that we've talked about, at least recommending talking about reaching out to the community and engaging, parents, families, people who don't have kids in the district, faculty and the rest of staff, to get input about what are the qualities that we should be looking for in a new superintendent. And you don't want to do that in the middle of the summer when a lot of people leave. So that weighs into it too. So being able to do that would be the fall, putting the profile together, and then they would actively be looking and meeting with candidates in January, February timeframe, so that it could be lined up for the following school year. So that's kind of what they mapped out to us from a timing perspective. It's not ideal because it doesn't line up with the calendar that we're working with, and so, right now, I'm not, you asked about what we thought. I don't have an opinion that we definitely should do 1 or 2. We certainly want to be able to attract the best candidates possible so that we can bring in the best candidate to be the new superintendent. But I think there are some mitigating factors right now that would determine how I'd feel about 1 or 2, per se. And certainly, in the past, when we've had this situation, we've brought in an interim. An interim can work and cannot work. It just depends on the circumstances. But anyway, so I think, I think that right now it's too early to determine which, from my perspective, just because there's some questions that the board needs answered first.
I think that both options, that we have good choices of options right now, 1 and 2, and this is a really important decision that we need to make, and getting the best pool, the biggest pool of candidates is very important. I think that engaging, as Chris said, all community members, everyone, and having people, the summer season is a very busy time of season where people come and go, and I think in order to get the best pool of candidates and have the community, the parents, even the students be involved in that, we need to think about what option best fits those people.
I would agree with Chris and Susan. I think the important thing is to get the best pool of candidates, to get the best candidate possible. And so I would be in favor of the option that gets us the best candidate possible, subject to logistics and personnel, which I think we're still working out. So I think it's too early to decide on option 1 or 2. But I think the goal needs to be to get the best candidate possible.
Susan, I know you just arrived, but
We just, yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm so appreciative that we're having this conversation in public. So I know it's kind of difficult because we have to try to really keep it to process and obviously not talk about personnel, but yeah, so I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I personally would like to see us avoid an interim if we can. You know, and we've had that before. I think it's nice when you go right to your permanent person. But you know, if that interim could be somebody who's known to us already or something, you know, that might be more interesting. But you know, I think there's some of these other external factors that are affecting, and I wonder if there's other alternatives to 1 and 2 because of those mitigating factors. So.
yeah, I mean, I think there's also the option to kind of with an asterisk, right, where if we interview and like somebody in, what is it, it's very far away, but March, right, and that person happens to be available right away, then it's only a 3-month gap as opposed to a 6-month gap. But either way, if we go with option 2, we have to plan for a 6-month gap, and we need to, so that's obviously the downside of option 2.
Right.
So that we need to kind of figure that out. But I think I'm hearing that kind of everyone would rather see the right candidate and have the right pool of applicants, and that's where I'm leaning towards as well, with the caveat that I don't like the idea of going with like a third-party interim and having to kind of be distracted by that and have that take up too much of our time. So that would be the one thing that I think would kind of skew the other way, is if we couldn't figure out a solution where we could get it done rather quickly.
Well, and I know, right, isn't everything is also going to be going through board leadership, and there will be an announcement and
School leadership?
School leadership, sorry, you know, and the announcement, but it's safe to say, right, I mean, we're able to say that the board is open to anything and all candidates, and,
Yeah.
right, excited to hear, you know, who approaches school leadership.
If we were gonna do option 1, if I remember the timeline correctly, we would need to do the community outreach and engagement before the end of the school year. Because we can't do it during I think we've all agreed we can't do it during the summer. Is that correct? Meeting with constitutional groups to review.
It's September, but
Oh, that is September, okay. So then it's really just the mitigating factor is that the application process is in October and November, when they just feel like it's too early to get enough candidates, good candidates.
yeah, and my original thought, because I was like, oh, we should just get it done, you know, my original thought was like, what if we get someone great really fast? But then, if we don't see that person against a larger pool, we don't know if we got the best candidate, which is.
But that could be a compromise. We could decide as a board to say, you know what, we do option 1 with a caveat or an asterisk to say, we open it up and the pool is not large enough for us to see someone outstanding, then we, you know, school leadership circles back in the beginning of the next year.
Yeah.
So that's almost like an option 3.
Yeah, and
That's
I
a
think,
marriage of the two.
I kind of think of that as kind of like when you have, I mean, Phil will probably agree with me on this, like when you have an RFP for any kind of bidding of anything, right? It's like, if you don't get the right number of bids, you figure you
Send it
gotta,
back out.
you
Yeah,
gotta
send it
send it
back
back out, so.
So that might, I mean, I know that's, you know, you don't know who might be around the corner if it was, the timing was different, and so there would be that voice in our heads potentially, but,
Right, and part of my thinking, and this is where school leadership has done thousands of searches, so they certainly are a much greater expert than myself, is the budget development process. I really felt like by leaving in January, the new leader could build their own budget with their own team and not inherit a budget that they don't know. And that is such a that's such a really challenging learning curve when you walk in and it's not a budget you've built. It isn't staff you know, it's not staff you've funded, it's not programming that you've gotten behind, and you're on this upward learning curve. That was, and you know, they were very wise in reflecting back to me, nice idea, like your thought, that is very cultural to Sag Harbor, that our whole community is really a part of our budget building. And he did say that was very culturally specific, but I don't know if you're gonna get your best leader.
They
And
said
it's
that's
so-
right, it conflicts with the
it conflict-
calendar that works the
Yeah,
best.
right, so, but it would be great if you got somebody in, say, in March or April, who could at least come in at the tail end of that building and see the school when it's vibrant and working, because it's a very unique district. And I've worked in almost 20 school districts over my time being, doing professional development and as a teacher and as a principal, assistant superintendent. And this school district, people really, really want to be part of the process and they want to understand it. And it'd be great if a person could, at least be involved in that process as well, so they understood what they were inheriting,
And I think what I heard from school leadership is that that people tend to come into these jobs at either coming in July 1 or maybe on the school year because they have spouses, they have kids,
Right,
so
right.
it's difficult. One of the things that I was thinking is, you'll undoubtedly have vacation days and what have you, so maybe there is a way to bring somebody in earlier, and then have a little overlap, which is always good. So, maybe that somebody that could come in October, November, and again, I think it all depends on who the candidate is, because there could be all kinds of scenarios where an unorthodox cycle could work.
Yeah.
So, I think we should be open. I don't see what the downside is to looking and not being like this dating mode of, oh wait, is there somebody better out there? If we find somebody great, we find somebody great, and I wouldn't worry about the other piece.
Yeah. So those are all, I think, great points. Anyone else have anything they wanna add?
What do you think?
Well, no, I think I'm leaning toward, I like the option 3, to be honest. I like the idea of why not try to see what we can get early on, but we can always extend it and go with a larger pool. I think, not that a new superintendent needs to be trained by an old one, but I think having overlap, whether it be formal or whatnot, I think I'd like to see kind of a new superintendent coming in and getting up to speed from Katie, as opposed to from an interim that's been there for 6 months and never really got a chance to be up to speed themselves. So I think there's a lot of pluses and minuses, and I think it sounds like there's really nothing for us to agree on or vote on about this today. I think it sounds like maybe at our next meeting, does that sound like we should be in a place where we might be more definitive?
Well, are we gonna be getting more feedback from some of the things that were raised in the other session, and some of those little factors that influence this?
by June 3rd, yes, I think so.
Well, the
Yeah.
other thing is that if we were gonna go with either option 1 or option 3, the next action step is September
September.
2019. that
Either
you-
way.
That they would be taking, so.
Yes, it's not as
so-
rushed
So
as-
perhaps it's not the next board meeting where we make a decision, perhaps we give the community an opportunity to give us some feedback as well. And just make sure we don't make a decision that's breathless.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Because again, according to this calendar, we do have a little bit of breathing room before having to decide which scenario.
Yeah. All right, so I guess, we don't have to all agree to not agree to anything. So, if there's nothing else, we'll go to public input 2.
Sounds good?
Is there anyone here who would like to speak at public input 2? Nope, okay, so I guess, we will convene, could I get a motion to convene to executive session for the superintendent evaluation?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor? All right, so, 7:03, okay.